I'm delighted to welcome Maria Klawe, president of Harvey College. So I feel like she almost needs no introduction. People here don't know her personally, and we simply know her by reputation. She's again president of Harvey Mudd College. She was a former dean of engineering at Princeton. She was at UBC for a period of time.
15 years.
Where she was a dean, a VP of student affairs, as well as head of computer science at different times. In addition to doing sort of all this administrative work in different universities, she also has a very well-established researcher, both in theoretical computer science and in mathematics, and has numerous awards, including, she's a member, a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Science, a fellow of the ACM, a founding fellow of the Canadian Information Processing Society, and so on. What we're particularly excited to have her here to talk about today is her work in increasing the percentage of women in computer science. And I know that all of us are really excited to hear what she has to say.
Thanks, Kate. Well, it's sort of nice to look around the room and see somebody whom I was an undergrad with. And George, I don't know about you, but I look in my mirror every day and I see my mother. And I'm sort of like, how did that happen? Where did those years go? But I will say there's one really good thing about having gray hair, and that's that actually people take what you say more seriously, which is always a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to talk about something that happened at Harvey Mudd College while I was there. I'm still there. I'm in my 8th year. And I want to just start by saying that I get an enormous amount of credit, and I deserve none of it. But I do enjoy, because the story I'm going to tell you about was really all done by about 4 of our computer science faculty members. Now that's actually a large percentage. We're a tiny place, so 4 is 40% of our CS department. But I do get to go around the country and that other country south talking about it. And I love talking about it. This is something that's been a passion of mine for pretty much my entire life. I'm old enough that when I was an undergraduate student, then a graduate student in mathematics, both at the University of Alberta, it was really common for a math prof to say to me, Maria, why do you want to be a mathematician? There are no good women mathematicians. Why would you do this? And it wasn't that they were telling me that I was bad at mathematics, because I was actually very good at mathematics. It's just that they knew I had all these other interests like art and politics and stuff, and they just couldn't figure out why I would pick math since there were no women in mathematics. And I think one of the things is that, I grew up literally as my father's son. I was sure I was going to wake up male until I was probably 9 years old. This was clearly just an error that had been made in the universe. And, but unfortunately, I never did wake up male. But all the things I loved were boy things, like I played the trumpet, I climbed trees, I read spy books from World War II. I just like dresses, and dolls were just not something that I wanted anything to do with under any circumstances. And so I think one of the things that happens that when you grow up feeling that way, it becomes because you're constantly bucking the culture because you're the wrong gender, it becomes a big thing to really try and change the culture of your discipline to try and make it one that is really nurturing and supporting and attractive to lots of different kinds of people. And so my daughter said to me when she was 17, she said, Mom, you think what you do with your life is important. You think that trying to change the culture of science and engineering so that it's friendly to women and minorities, you think that's important. It's not. I'm going to work on the big problems of the world. I'm going to solve healthcare, the economy, and literacy in the developing world. And I go like, you go, girl. So she's 28 now. She spent the summer in Yemen helping the Yemenis rewrite their constitution. So I got to say, she at least, puts her life where her beliefs are. So when I arrived at Mudd, I was very interested in trying to increase the percentage of women students. And I'll talk a little bit about what the numbers were when I arrived and what they are now, and also the percentage of women faculty. But a year before I arrived at MUD, a young assistant professor, Christine Alvarez, had arrived at MUD right after finishing her PhD in sketch recognition at MIT. Now, Christine's story is that she was an undergrad at Dartmouth, had a great experience, and then went to MIT, and for the first time in her life, people said to her, "You only got in because you're a girl. You're not as good as the rest of us." And she heard that both from graduate students and from faculty at MIT, and it really bugged her. And one of the things about when that happens to you is, yeah, it makes you really mad, but it also causes you to often doubt yourself inside. And so when she arrived at MUD and found that only 10% of our students majoring in computer science were female, she decided to do something about it. So the person who really deserves the vast majority of the credit for this is Christine Alvarez. Christine is now at UCSD. We miss her. Her husband was a faculty member at UCSD, and she was a faculty member at MUD. And after they had their second child, they decided that they actually wanted to be in the same geographic location all the time, and so they are. So I'm going to talk about how this happened at MUD. I'll tell you that the current percentage of females in CS hovers between 38 and 45% at MUD, depending on the particular year. So this year in our graduating class, it was 38%. In our juniors, it's like 45% right now. So it just varies. Okay, so let me talk about why there are so few females majoring in computer science. And I'll just say that in the United States, at PhD granting computer science departments, the percentage of bachelor's degrees that are going to women has been between 11 and 14% for the last 5 years. And I gather that the number in computer science here at the University of Waterloo is something like 11, 12%. So it's right in line with what's happening in the United States. So it's very easy to figure out why there are so few young women who are interested in majoring in computer science. The first thing is, in both Canada and in the United States, we tell our young people routinely, do what you love, do what you're good at, and you'll be happy. That's not actually what they do in China or in India or in Saudi Arabia, for that matter, where apparently the majority of computer science majors are female. It's hard to believe, but it's true. So what happens is that there are 3 reasons that young women don't want to go into computer science. The first one is they think it's boring, like, boring. The second one is that they think that the people who are computer scientists are all geeky guys with no social skills and no life. And the third reason is that they think they wouldn't be good at it. And let me talk a little bit about the reason they think they wouldn't be good at it. Back in the early 1980s, the percentage of computer science majors who were female was between low to mid 30s. And what happened in the 80s was that PCs entered homes and schools. And children who used those personal computers mostly used them to play games. And we all know, how little computational power there was in those computers. Like, I mean, any cell phone today is so much more powerful. So if you were actually programming a game for a computer, just about the only thing you could do was actually track a bullet or a laser or whatever going across the screen in terms of what the graphics capabilities were. So it's not surprising that most of the games were either, sort of ping pong type thing, or more likely, shoot at that spaceship or at that person or whatever. And those games were much more attractive to young men than they were to boys than they were to girls. And boys very quickly started to, I'll use the word hog, but this is not a malicious thing, but they loved being on the computer. And they also started to learn how to program in order to be able to create their own games. And almost overnight, computers became a boy thing as far as teachers, parents, and children themselves were concerned. And so, you know, a very standard thing for somebody in an introductory computer science class is that there's a couple of guys, maybe more than a couple, who seem to know, I mean, they just know everything about computers and they can't stop talking about it. And it's very intimidating to the other people in the class. I just want to say, does anyone here want to acknowledge being that young person in that class, in their intro class? Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we have a few. Now, it's not that these guys are bad people. They're not. But they probably have taught themselves most of what they knew about computer science, and all of a sudden they're in a class with a computer scientist. And oh my goodness, it's so exciting to talk to a real computer scientist. They have, I think for the most part, no idea that they're really intimidating everybody else in the room. So it's not surprising that so few young women enter university thinking that they would like to major in computer science. But it's more than just, you know, lots of people, lots of young women not being interested. Even for those who are interested, they are about twice as likely to leave either computer science or engineering as white and Asian males are. And the reason is that if you are an underrepresented group, and particularly if you're female, you often really doubt whether you belong. And the first time you get a B+ instead of an A on a homework assignment or in a midterm, you sort of go, I knew I wasn't really that good at this stuff. And so one of the other things one really has to work on is that when the numbers of women are low, you actually have to provide a disproportionate amount of encouragement in terms of having them stick with it and actually complete the program. So let me tell you about Harvey Mudd. So first of all, we have no graduate students. We are very small. I know more than half of the students by name. We actually have, these slides are from actually 2011, so we actually have 803 students now. We're not supposed to have 803. We had this little glitch in our admission thing where we admitted a bunch of students, and then one of our new assistant professors, we sometimes call her the replacement for Christine, she's in CS, her name is Colleen Lewis. She decided to invite all of the faculty to participate in contacting by email or by phone every admitted student of color so that we could try and increase the number of African American Hispanic students. But she did it after we'd admitted the students. That resulted in us being 20 students over our target. Okay, we have about 90 faculty in 7 departments. The 7 departments, we are a science and engineering school. So we have 6 science, well, we have an engineering department, we have physics, chemistry, biology, computer science, and math. And then we have HSA, which stands for Humanities, Social Sciences, and the Arts. And so we're a science and engineering school, but our students take 30% of their courses in humanities, social sciences, and the arts, so which is the highest of any science and engineering program in at least the United States, probably in Canada too. And one thing that's sort of unusual about Mudd is that you don't choose what your major is until you can go as long as the end of your second year. And all students take a really insane set of courses for the first 3 semesters. So by insane, they take 6 half-semester math courses. And in the first course, which is calculus of a single variable, for those mathematicians here, it's an epsilon delta proofs, and it covers everything that Princeton does, Princeton engineering, or Princeton math does in the first 3 semesters at Princeton in 6 weeks. And plus it does it with epsilon delta proofs, which Princeton doesn't. As I said, it's sort of insane what we do with our students. But one of the things that makes the story that I'm going to tell possible is that every single student has to take a computer science course in their first semester. Now, it's been that way for, I don't know, at least 20, 25 years. So it's not as though that by itself explains how it went from 10 to 42%. But it does give you an opportunity. So let me just ask, does every math student have to take a computer science course in the first semester? They do? Okay, so they have to take 2 semesters. Good. Second question is, can you switch from math to CS if you want to? Can you do a joint math CS degree? Yes. And is it true that we have a whole bunch of women in the actuarial and statistics majors? Okay, your problem is solved, guys. Okay, so let me tell you how they went from 10 to 40%. Before I actually tell you what the CS department did, I do want to take epsilon amount of credit for having increased the number of female students at MUD overall. So it was about 20, just over 20%, 16 years ago. When I arrived in 2006, it was a little over 30%. It was 45% by 2012. It's now about 47%. Just want to mention, we did actually have, oh, well, I didn't put it there. In 2011, is that right? No, 2010, we had an entering class that was 51.5% female. Terrible mistake. What do you think the students and faculty were saying to those 51.5% female students? You only got in because you were a girl. It's so frustrating. Not every student and not every faculty, but you know, the reality is that when you're a tiny, tiny place, and we admit, in order to get 200 students in an incoming class, we admit, let's say, 614. And we've been admitting 50-50 male and female for probably the second year I was there. So it's random how many you actually get. And we had this random year in 2010 where we got more females than males. And all of a sudden, the year before, it was 42% female in the incoming class. They figured that you couldn't possibly have had that thing change that way without having, quote unquote, lowered the standards. So, I mean, it's frustrating, but we're doing really well at staying at 47.5% female. For some reason, if we're at 47.5% female, we didn't lower the standards. If we're at 51% female, we lowered the standards. Okay, let me tell you about female faculty at MUD overall. It was about 20%, 1997, about 35% by the time I arrived, and it's been hovering between 40 and 43% for the last few years. Now, that's amazing. I mean, when I was Dean of Science at UBC, we were so excited when we got the percentage of female faculty up to 18%. Woo! We were so excited at Princeton when we got the percentage of female faculty in the engineering school up to 15%. There is a reason why it's so high at MUD. And the reason is there's only one place in the world where you can teach the kind of students that are at MUD. So MUD students are basically, take your very favorite honors Canadian students, take the top 5% of that, that's a MUD student. Okay? Take the top 20% of the engineering students at Princeton, that's a MUD student. That's in the bottom 10% of the MUD students. They're amazing students. MIT and Caltech has very similar students, except if you're at MUD, you're going to be valued as much for your teaching and for your education of those students as you will be for your research. In fact, you will be more valued. And one of the things about women faculty in science and engineering, often they really care about teaching. And if you want to be valued for your teaching and teach amazing students, MUD would be the place to be. Okay, so here's what the computer science department did. They changed the intro course. Previous intro course, learn to program in Java. But, you know, presenting basic computer science concepts, I mean, just what you would think. Very standard intro course. New intro course, creative problem solving in science and engineering through computational approaches using Python. Okay, so let me repeat that. Creative problem solving. That word creative is really important because young women like being creative and they love solving problems. So do young men, actually. Okay, creative problem solving of problems in science and engineering. Remember, we're a science and engineering school, so every kid arrives thinking that they would love to do something in science and engineering. Using computational approaches, well, you had to get the computer in there somewhere. Using Python. Okay, so let me focus on Python just for a moment. So there are many forgiving programming languages you could teach with, but most of them don't actually get used in the real world by real software developers. But Python, I mean, most software developers today, they'll use Python to prototype, and then they'll figure out where the pinch points are in terms of things running fast enough, and they'll change those parts into either Java or C++ or C# or whatever your favorite programming language is. And so by using Python, we're actually teaching our students a skill that they can use for a summer job in their first summer. We eliminated student macho behavior. That's what I was referring to. You there, would you come up front, please? What's your name? Yes? Seriously? You were the first one to admit it. What's your name?
Stephen.
Stephen. Okay, Stephen. Oh, Stephen, I love having you in my class. You are so well prepared and you're so passionate about it. And I love that you talk to me about computer science. I'm sure you don't realize that some of the other students are a little bit intimidated by how smart you are and how much you know. Love to have these conversations just one-on-one, but if we could not do it in class, that'd be really good.
Okay.
Did I make you feel good?
Yes.
Thank you, Stephen. It works. I mean, it really works. And you might say, well, you know, what if I'm teaching a class with 200 students in it? Well, you have TAs. And presumably you have some sections with TAs where the TA could have that conversation. We also, and this was started by Christine Alvarez, Christine had this idea, you know, how do we persuade our students that there are lots of amazingly wonderful, successful women in computer science? You take them to a place where you can show them lots of wonderful, successful women in computer science. So the first year that Christine did this, which was in 2006, Hopper, the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, was in San Diego. Okay, well that's like a 2-hour drive from Harvey Med College. So she asked me for some money, and that's, but the only thing I can take any credit for is I gave money occasionally in very small amounts. So she tried to recruit 15 students to take to Hopper. She only got 12, so we took 3 male students. And they had a good time. The next year she took 22. This year we took 40 to Minneapolis. Last year we took actually 59 to Baltimore. Is that where it was last year? No, maybe it was Atlanta. Anyway, wherever it was. And the logic is, it doesn't matter whether our students are going to choose to be engineers or physicists or mathematicians or campus biologists. It's going to be great for them to see a whole bunch of really successful women of all ages who are confident and friendly and open and enthusiastic about what they're doing. This year in Minneapolis, so did anyone here go to Hopper in Minneapolis? Yay! This year in Minneapolis, there were 4,800 attendees. There might have been 100 males. It's an amazing experience to be in a room with 4,000 technical women. And you know, the other thing that's really nice for our students is, so most places, you know, Harvey Mudd is just not that well known. The only place that's really well known is at Hopper. And so they go to Hopper and everyone's going, oh, you're from Harvey Mudd. You have all those women at Harvey Mudd. And it's like, they feel like rock stars. So it's turned into a really great thing. The other thing we did was we provided summer research experiences for between 8 and 10 female students between their first year and their second year. That particular summer is a hard time to get great jobs We also know there's lots of research that shows that if you get women and other underrepresented groups, it's so funny being back in Canada because, you know, race is such a big thing in the US. And, you know, I mean, if you fix things for women in Canada, you're pretty much done. If you fix things for women in the US, you're not done at all. You just got started. But we know from research is that if you can get young women and other underrepresented groups involved in research early on, they're more likely to actually graduate to persist. Okay. So, I already told you. So the old course, Learn to Program in Java, was the most despised required course in the first semester, except for Stephen and other people like Stephen. The guys who came in ready loving computer science, they nailed that course, but everyone else was terrified of it. As I said, this is the new course. Now, they did something as well as just changing the course. So they used a lot more teamwork than they had used in the past, but they also made the problems the most ridiculously fun. So it might be that there's green spam that's hidden in different places in a maze, and you have to program this robot to go find the green spam. But another thing they did was, let's suppose you're doing an exercise on recursion. One of the things we know about young women is they like choice. So there would be 3 different assignments, and they could pick the one modeling epidemiology and spread of disease. They could pick the one about robots and the spam, or they could pick the one about the physics problem. Every single assignment is going to test the same concepts, but you're giving them the sense that they actually have choice. Now, the other thing, in addition to, you know, dealing with students who talked way too much in the class, they also grouped the sections of the intro course is called CS5 into 2 groups, one called CS5 Gold and one called CS5 Black. Okay, which color, just without knowing anything about it, would you rather be in? Gold. Gold, of course you would. That's for the people who know nothing. So you're putting the people who know nothing into the great color of the class, so nobody's embarrassed by it. And then you're putting the ones who know more in CS5 Black. And then we always have some students like Stephen and a few others of you here. They're really just way too advanced for either of the CS5 sections. So we give them their own section. It's called CS42. Now, it combines CS5 and CS60 if you had to pick a number between 5 and 60. So this course, in 1 year, it went from being the most hated required course in the first semester to the most loved. And, you know, a standard, so one of the things, because our first year students are all essentially in the same set of classes together, they clump. And MUD is this linear campus. It's sort of like Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, if you've ever been there. Terrible design for an airport, but very good for a campus, because at one end are all the dorms, and 95% of our students live on campus. The other end are all the academic buildings, and then sort of the stuff like the dining hall and the student center are in the middle. And there's a long strip of grass, and then there's sidewalks on either side. And typically you will see a group of like a dozen first years walking together down the sidewalk. And I would just go up to them and stop them, and I'd say, okay, 3 weeks into this first semester, I want to know what your favorite class is. They go, the standard response is, I hate computers. I love CS5. I can't believe how much fun it is. I hate computers. I love CS5. So these same people who arrived thinking that they had no interest in computers at all, and they were going to have to take this horrible course, they're going, I love CS5. Now, you know, there's other competitors. The math courses are very popular as well. There's an autonomous vehicles that's very popular. There's special relativity, special rel as it's known in physics. But CS5 dominates by far. So 1 year. Now, just in case you're interested, we make all of our materials available to anyone who wants them. I mean, it's our goal to help as many places make their Info CS class as much fun as you possibly can. So 2 days ago, I'm testifying before the the Senate Commerce Committee, which is looking to reauthorize the America Competes Act, and that's the bill that is supposed to be doubling the funding for NSF over a multi-year period. And so I was there. So there's a physics Nobel laureate, and there's vice chair of the science board, and there's another guy here, and there's me, and I'm the designated hitter for diversity in STEM education. So I'm telling the story about how we did this in 5 minutes, and you've got this thing ticking in front of you. Well, one of the Republicans, he goes, "We need rigor. I don't want to hear about making courses fun. We need rigor." I'm going like, "Excuse me, we did not take out any of the rigor. It's actually, they do more coding and tougher problems than they did before. They just love it." Okay, so what are the results from this new intro course? So Harvey College is one of 5 undergraduate colleges that make up the Claremont colleges. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, the campuses are right beside each other. There's Mudd, there's the Women's College Scripps, there's Pitzer, which is a hippie college created in the 60s, there's CMC, which is the jock college, and then there's Pomona, which is the classical liberal arts preppy college. We're the geeks and dorks, in case you didn't realize that. I have to tell you a story about my daughter. So my daughter comes with me to, when I'm being introduced, they've just announced I'm going to be the next president, and it's like January, and I'm going to start beginning of July, and she comes with me. We're meeting all kinds of people, including lots of students. At the end of the day, she goes, "The students were pretty nice, really dorky, but pretty nice." And I go, "They were not dorky." And she said, "How would you know? You're a dork. You're married to a dork. Your son is a dork. All of your friends are dorks." Okay, so one of the things that traditionally happens at Mudd is that the students from the other colleges, so the students can take courses at all of the other colleges, and they don't pay extra tuition or anything. But the problem is that Mudd is known to have by far the hardest courses, so most of the students at the other colleges don't want to take Mudd courses. Mudd students, on the other hand, take tons of courses at the other colleges. Well, except that the word got out about how much fun CS5 is. And this year we have 441 students in CS5. Of those, 170 are from Mudd, because we have about 40 in CS42. The other 271 are from every other college. And we have all kinds of Scripps students, that's the women's college, who arrived thinking they were going to major in psychology or fine art or something. They're majoring in computer science at Mudd. Well, why wouldn't they? Because 50% of every class at Mudd is female. Why wouldn't they? You get fabulous jobs if you major in computer science. Why wouldn't you? So it's caused a little bit of a problem. We only have 10 faculty members. Out of our 195 third-year students this year, 80 are CS majors. So engineering, which typically has 80 to 90 majors, because it's a general engineering program, it has 19 faculty. And you guys probably realize you cannot pick up a faculty member who's over in this department and say, "Wouldn't you like to be a computer science faculty member now?" Yeah. So we have a little bit of a problem, but it's a good problem to have, except if you're the president. Okay, so I already told you about Christine. I told you about, we used to offer every incoming female student a free trip to the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing. Now we've realized, so the year that we took, 50 of them, it was starting to cause scheduling problems in our labs. And because they're going to miss 2 days at the college, and it was just making problems. So now what we do is we promise every incoming female student that if they want to go to Hopper, they'll have a chance sometime during their time at Mudd. And that's actually a really good thing, because it turns out that for many students, you're going to have your best experience at Hopper in your third year possibly your second year, because there are so many companies there recruiting for internships and for regular jobs, that actually being a little bit more senior. So this year we took 25 first years and then another 15 students at later years. So, so I only have, how many students from Waterloo went to Hopper in Minneapolis?
This year, not very many, I think 3 students.
How many?
3.
3? Okay. So let me just talk to you. You guys have a Google in the Waterloo-Kitchener area. I've heard that they're recruiting all of these people who got laid off by BlackBerry. Anyway, it's very smart of Google to put themselves right here with such a great faculty of mathematics and great students and all that kind of stuff. You just go ask them for money. I mean, it's not particularly expensive to send students. I mean, it's going to be a little bit more, I mean, for you guys, Minneapolis would have been really pretty close. I think it's Phoenix this year, or something like that. But you guys should be taking 25 female students. I mean, I know that you've got 2,500 CS undergrads. Can that be right? I think that's right.
Almost very difficult to count.
Yeah. It's infinite. Okay, a few thousand. So even if you only have 10% that are female, that's a few hundred. You should be taking 25, 50 of them. It will change. What's that?
Yeah, we quite often do. However, the event that you're a part of tomorrow is the reason why we didn't send so many people.
Oh, 'cause got it, Dan. Thank you.
We were focusing on the event here in Ontario.
Good. All right. It's incredibly easy to raise money for. I mean, actually, I now have one better example of something that's easy to raise money for, but this is my second easiest thing to raise money for. And, you know, it really makes a big difference. They come away feeling inspired. They've seen everything from graduate students to young faculty members, young professionals in their career, all the way through up to the most senior women in the tech industry. I already mentioned that some research experiences. One of the things, you know, I give a lot of talks to women in the tech industry, and they all want to know how we did this, and how they can get more of our female students to come work for them after they graduate. And what I tell them is, start an internship program that recruits students in that summer in between their first year and their second year, because that's the hardest time to get a great job. And if you do a wonderful job, and I also talk to them about how they interview. I mean, I can tell you there are very few women, I would be the exception, but there are very few women who love to be given an adversarial challenge in their interview and expect to solve it on their feet. So I was talking to one of our students who was interviewed by Microsoft for one of these, I can't even remember what they call their early internship program. The question he was given in his interview was, please explain Java or any other object-oriented programming language, how you would explain it to a 5-year-old. I loved that, because they're really measuring the person's communication skills. They're measuring the ability to explain something complicated in a clear way. That's the kind of question that any young woman would love to answer. Well, assuming that she actually knew something about object-oriented programming. So, you know, often when I give this talk, people go, well, you know, but yeah, sure you could do that at Harvey Mudd College. Wouldn't work here. So let's talk about what does work at any institution. There's no reason, if you're teaching a computer science course, not to have it be the most fun course ever. Well, my most fun course ever was actually my honors calculus class at the University of Alberta. So, but you know, you could tie with that. There's no reason not to help students feel less intimidated by removing the kind of behavior that, you know, makes other people feel like they don't belong. So I'll just tell you a story about, after I'd been at Mudd for a couple of years, I was talking to a couple of our alumni who'd graduated maybe the year before I arrived. And I asked them, how many female computer science majors were there in your year? And one of them said 1. And the other one said, no, there were 2. Remember, there was Jane and Christy. And he said, oh, but Christy wasn't a real CS major because she didn't hang out with us. She didn't do all the things that CS majors did. So, one of the things we can all do is make our environment comfortable for people who don't look like the norm. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about an imposter panel, which I don't think I think I was asking Nancy whether you guys had done this or not. How many people know what an imposter panel is? Oh, nobody. Oh, this is so much fun. Okay. So Corey Ingpen, who was my PhD student while I was at UBC, jointly with Kelly Booth, well-known name to those of you here. And Corey's now a senior researcher at Microsoft Research in Redmond. And she contacted me when it was time to submit panels for the 2010 Hopper celebration, which was in Colorado. And she said, Maria, I have this idea about doing an imposter panel. And I said, so what are you thinking? She said, well, I was thinking we could get, like 5 women who everyone else thinks is really successful, who suffer from the imposter syndrome, and we could have them talk about it on the panel. I went, oh, that's a great idea. We'll just ask 3 other people. So Corey and I had a lot of conversations about the imposter syndrome when she was a graduate student. I mean, she was one of those, she grew up in Halifax. She only went to graduate school because her faculty at Dow made her apply to graduate school. I mean, made her apply to graduate school. And she was only gonna do a master's, and I met her, got to know her, I think, at a Christmas party her first semester, and I recruited her to start the eGEMS, Electronic Games for Education, Math, and Science project with me. And I was determined she was going to do a PhD. And she stuck it out for at least 12 months before she said yes. And I'm really persuasive. I worked really hard at it. So anyhow, so the idea for the imposter panel is you pick any 4 or 5 highly successful women. I can pretty much guarantee that they will suffer from the imposter syndrome. So what is the imposter syndrome? It's this feeling that even people think you're successful. You have done things that look like you're successful. You just wake up most days with this voice on one side of your head going, I'm such a failure. I cannot believe what a failure I am. I'm just such a failure. Fortunately, well, that's the voice I have on that side of my head. Fortunately, many of these women also have this other voice, like I do, on the other side of my head, which goes, I can change the world. I'm a failure, but I can change the world. So, so what we did was each of us on the panel made a set of like 4 slides. The first slide, so my career as a something imposter. So mine was my career as a presidential imposter. Okay, Corey's was my career as a senior researcher imposter. We had somebody else who was very successful, just got a career award from NSF, young faculty member, et cetera. So anyhow, the next slide in your deck goes my presidential imposter's career. So for me, it starts, PhD, 1977, University of Alberta, blah, 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 then, like head of CS department, UBC, and then there's VP, and then Dean of Engineering at Princeton, then President at MUD, then Microsoft board, then Broadcom board, then whatever. It looks impressive. So then the next one is the things that make me feel like an imposter. So what are the things that make me feel like an imposter? Almost always for me, it's when I'm doing something that I have done infrequently. Especially if it's something that successful people do and that many women don't do. And also anything that involves physical coordination is the worst. And then the next slide after that is, I have felt like an imposter doing. And then I did mine by decades. So in the 1970s, riding in taxis, eating in restaurants, staying in hotels. Well, I had wonderful parents. They were both academics, but they didn't have a lot of money. and they had 4 kids. And so we didn't ride in taxis, eat in restaurants, or stay in hotels when I was a kid. We just didn't. So imagine you go to your first conference, you're supposed to take a taxi from the airport, and you're going like, I'm going to get in a car with a stranger? This could not be a good idea. I mean, nobody would want to do that. Well, you know, that was the 70s. The 80s, it was something else. By the time we get to the aughts, you know, it's meeting billionaires, giving press conferences, joining the Microsoft board. That was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life. The final slide is how I cope with imposteritis. And for me, it's, first of all, practice, practice, practice. Because when you do something multiple times, it doesn't feel nearly as scary. Number 2 is look back as well as ahead. It really helps to remember how scared I was doing whatever it was, and now that it feels okay. And then the third one is make myself do things that scare me crazy. Because one of the things about doing things that really terrify you is you learn that they're not so terrifying. So I will tell you about what I'm doing right now that is scaring me crazy. I've had several people try to teach me how to dance in my life. I mean, like, you know that kind of dancing where you're actually, like a waltz or something, where you're actually supposed to be led if you're the female? So Claremont colleges have this really excellent ballroom dancing team. And they either come in second at the nationals or first virtually every year. And MUD male students, all of the females did ballet, right? You have to be really good if you're a female dancer. But they never have enough males. So the MUD students, males, have gotten really smart. And so they sign up to learn to ballroom dance when they arrive at MUD, because it's a great way of meeting women. And so we have this student who's in his final year now, he's a physics major, called Luke. Luke is one of the leads for the competition team. So this dancing thing runs a Dancing with the Stars competition every fall. And the idea is that you take some poor unsuspecting person like a president and teach them how to dance. So I am learning how to do a dance routine. And so I'm practicing things like Luke is a very good teacher. Luke really wants to win this. The guy's nuts. So I want to focus on the bottom one. You know, if you could make those first 2 courses that every student in the Faculty of Mathematics has to take in computer science the most fun ever, the least intimidating, without removing rigor, you'd have a really good shot at getting some of those the women who are currently planning on majoring in actuarial science or statistics or just straight math into doing double majors. And, you know, in my opinion, absolutely everyone, independent of what they're going to do in their life, whether they're going to be, you know, historian or a librarian or journalist, they'll be better off doing some computer science. So you could also do what UBC has done, which is recruit a bunch of psychology, biology, and chemistry majors to do double majors in computer science. UBC is currently, they're typically between 22 and 25% female on their CS major, but they're a third female in their joint majors. They're 40% female in their joint CS biology major. And I mean, I don't know about Waterloo, but every other place I've been, well, actually that's not true because this is not true at MUD, because the grades are so horrible at MUD that you can't get into med school afterwards. In 7,000 graduates, we've had 7 people graduate with a 4.0. We don't like to give A's. It's sort of like a C means you did the work. A B means, wow, you did really well. And an A is like, okay, you're so over the top incredible and did something so original, we have to give you an A. So, but at most places, many of the biology and chemistry majors think they're going to med school, and the vast majority won't. And so I remember being Dean of Science at UBC. It's so depressing to have all kinds of people graduating and being mad because they majored in biology and chemistry. How much better if they actually did a double major with computer science, and then they would be able to get a job that pays $80,000 a year or whatever right after they graduate. So I would guess, the thing I would say about getting more women into any discipline, I don't know a single computer science department that's worked hard on it over an extended period of time that has failed. At UBC, it went from like 15 to like 25%. Right? It's probably never going to be 40% there just because of the dynamics. At Carnegie Mellon, it went from like 8% to they're roughly at 30% today. At MIT, they are amazingly at 32% female in their CS major. Stanford's working on it really hard right now. They're up from 10% 2 years ago in their graduating class to 17% this last year. My guess is that they'll get it up to 25%. So it's all a question of, are you willing to put in the effort? And it can't be just one person. It really has to be something that a number of people are going to commit to. And let me say, Christine Alvarez, she was a catalyst, but the 3 other people that worked with her, they were all male faculty. So, this is not a problem to be solved by the female faculty. It's a problem that, as a community, you have to decide is important and then work on it. And I would be happy to answer questions. Dan.
I'm gonna be the statistical threat here. Okay, the thing is, how do you know that the reason you got 40%, up to 40%, isn't that you soaked up all the women who might have gone to UCLA, USC, and other places just because Harvey is so much better a place for women that any woman who was interested in computer science came to Harvey. Now, the reason I'm asking this is that over my career, 40% of my PhD students have been women. I haven't done anything to attract them.
It's just that you are so much less bad than the other possibilities.
Yeah. So, the thing is, I was more reasonable as an advisor than my male chauvinist colleague. So, I ended up with basically half of the PhD students at UCLA. So it didn't change the total numbers. It's
just clump them all with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great question.
You haven't soaked up everybody who might have gone to another university.
It's a great question, but we actually do know this. So when the students apply to MUD, they indicate what they're interested in majoring in if they know. And most students, they might say physics or math or engineering or whatever. Each year, the number of female students we admit to MUD who have expressed interest in majoring in computer science is like 2.
Okay, so you're saying that number has not gone up?
Nope.
Okay, so you're not soaking them?
We're not soaking them up. No, so that's why.
Also a good idea.
Well, it is a great place to be a female student, there's no doubt, because you've got lots of female faculty, and also, there's no competition for grades. Every student has the responsibility to help every other student succeed. There's just all kinds of things that make it an extremely supportive, also extremely challenging. I will tell you, our students work 100 hours a week. I've never seen students work as hard as they work at MUD. But no, we are not just soaking up, because let me tell you, there's not enough young women out there who are interested. They're just not out there. This is why, you guys actually have a real chance to do something, because at least you have those students in your classes. Yes?
Follow-up question. If you're not soaking up and there's really only 2, 3 who express interest in coming in, you're doing a lot of things once they're there.
Right.
Like the first year course. So that part of it I get. What I really want to understand is why are not more girls interested in math and computer science? So how far back do we need to go in their educational experience
So,
to start having an effect on their choices? Because I think, I think we should do everything that you said in terms of how to improve their lot once they're here, or convince them once they're here. But there's got to be things that we can do that look at the pipeline before they get here.
yep. So,
What are those things that
yeah, so let me talk a little bit about a project that, again, some of our faculty have been working on. And they've been creating a course called MyCS, Middle Years Computer Science, MyCS, aimed at grade 5 and grade 6 students. And this started initially because the person who started the project, his granddaughter was in grade 5. She was very good at math, and he was worried that she was going to get turned off. And so he decided to go in and teach a computer science course to her 5th grade. And then he got interested enough in it and got a big NSF grant to actually train a number of teachers to do it. So probably in the surrounding area, we have like 30 or 40, maybe more teachers who are actually teaching this course in middle school. But what we decided to do, I don't know how big a deal MOOCs are at Waterloo, but there's all kinds of hype about massive open online courses in the US. And like any other place, I had a couple people on my board who are going, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you? And I'm going like, we're a tiny face-to-face institution. We're high touch. But we decided that we'd try out MOOCs by creating a MOOC for MyCS. And with the goal of, one, not so much having middle school students actually take the course online, but making it really easy for a middle school or high school teacher to teach the course. And the people who are doing the videos, so they're all very short videos, they're like 2 minutes, they're our students. And that allowed us to have female students and African-American students. And so we're trying to role model the fact that anyone can love computer science. And it should be available by, well, certainly by September of next year. And it'll be free, anyone can have access to it. Also, code.org is creating curricula and training teachers from kindergarten with computing activities, computer science related activities from kindergarten through grade 12. They're just getting started. So for example, if you happen to run Internet Explorer as your browser, this is not a good time to look at code.org's website because it doesn't work with IE, but it works fine with Safari and Chrome and a bunch of other things. However, I guess the thing that I say is I actually like doing it at the college level. And here's the following reason. I mean, I have done outreach stuff for girls around math and CS. I probably did my first one when I was 17 years old. So that's a really long time. And what I've learned is that if you do it early, you can have them interested when they're 10 years old, and by the time they're 13, the peer pressure is all against going in that direction. The great thing about doing it in the first year of college is, so it's not that we take the students to Hopper and have them take the first course and they go, oh yeah, I'm going to be a CS major. No way. It's a really hard hump to get over. What we do is we make the first course fun, the second course really fun, the third course, which is referred to as a way of life rather than a course. It's an incredible amount of work. But once you've taken the third course and you've been in those courses, and it's roughly 50-50 male and female, and you're seeing that you're getting these great summer job offers, all of a sudden they sort of go, I can major in CS. I can do that. So, and the thing is that they stay. I mean, once they've chosen to major in CS, they don't drop out. Whereas if you really focus on middle school or on beginning high school, you run the problem that our society, our culture in our society pushes women away from it. So I'm a big believer in, by all means, try things at every level. But first year of college, even second year of college is not too late. I mean, one of the things UBC does is they have a summer semester where you can take the first 3 courses in the computer science sequence. And so let's suppose you started out majoring biology, then you decided that maybe you should learn something else as well. You can take that first summer between first and second year, take all the CS classes, and then be right on time to do your double major and graduate in 4 years, or 5 if you're in co-op. Yes?
I mean, maybe it's partly in the naming. They named these 2 first-year courses, CS5 Gold and CS5 Blue, and Gold is the one that doesn't come with background. But I was an undergraduate institution that had honors and not, and boy, there's a big stigma difference. And so how do you keep it from being the good CS and the dumb CS?
Yeah, I think it's because the faculty, you know, they're very clear about you're going to get to the same endpoint, whichever course you get. And it is true that the ones in CS5 Black, the assignments might be take the students slightly further, but we don't see any difference when the students take the next course in the sequence. And you know, I think there is a big difference between calling something honors and not honors, especially in the Canadian context, right? I mean, the smart kids are in the honors program, the not so, or not?
I'm American, so I was
Okay, all right, all right.
All of ours are honors.
What was that?
All of our undergrads are
So our honors, very smart move, yes. That's like, yes.
Of the many good points that you made, I think the one that resonated with me was the one about taking away the macho environment. As an undergrad, I didn't notice it. It was only when I got to grad school that suddenly I felt like everybody else in the class would fail, that somehow I was the imposter in that group. So it's interesting to hear that that removing that or trying to remove it has made a positive impact, because that was certainly, and the thing was, at the time I didn't even really probably recognize what it was that was bothering me or what was making me feel like an imposter. But it really did seem like the guys all knew how to talk the talk and walk the walk, and I didn't have a clue. But in fact,
But you did fine.
I did fine. Well, I guess this is fine, but yes. I'm still here.
Yes.
Can you say more about the differences between CS5 Black and CS5 Gold? Do they have different assignments? Do they have different schedules? What are the differences and what are the similarities other than the students who take the course?
So they're covering the same concepts. They have the same schedules in the sense that you know, they meet the same number of times per week. They have they do labs together. I'd say the assignments, I mean, I have not taught either CS5 Black or Gold, but in talking to the instructors, they will say, you know, maybe the assignments are slightly more challenging in CS5 Black. Maybe they get off to a slightly faster start, but you know, there's really not much difference by the time you get to the end. CS42 is different. I mean, CS42 is really for students who've taken a full year of computer science at a college or university before they got to MUD, and so you know that's just a different ilk. CS5 Black would be maybe somebody who's done an APCS class, something like that. And
so the difference is really in the students that take the courses and the environment differences that creates.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. I mean, it's very surprising to me that it makes such a difference. But it does. I mean, I'll tell you another thing that UBC did. We had a computer literacy course, which was a computer literacy course back in the days, right? It was like the World Wide Web, and it maybe had like 2 weeks of programming some point in it. And they changed that to be applications of computer science in psychology, fine art, and music. And it was already like 60 to 70% female in that course. And we did that partly because we know that on average, women are going to be more interested in applications of computing than they are going to be just in the intrinsic interest in computing, at least initially. But we also trained the instructors of the CS 100 course to very deliberately encourage the female students and the male students, but especially the female students, because there were a lot more of them, who were doing well in it, to take the regular Intro to CS class. And one of the things we had to do, which was actually while I was Dean of Science, was initially you couldn't take, if you were a science student, you couldn't take both for credit in the Faculty of Science. And so we just changed that. So in fact, you could take both for credit in the Faculty of Science. And that proved a pretty good pathway for recruiting young women into computer science as well, because UBC Science didn't have computer science, any courses required for computer science. We also did stuff like, we had a sentence in the handbook for incoming first-year students that said something like, the Dean of Science recommends that every science student, independent of major, take a computer science course. Politically, we couldn't make it a required course, because politically that was just impossible. But turns out that female students read, and they actually follow advice.
They read instructions.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're the president of the entire college, which includes several subjects other than computer science. How do the people in those other subjects feel about making computer science especially attractive to female students, when I think they probably have ratio problems too, maybe even worse ratio problems?
No, computer science was by far the worst. So at the time when the computer science was 10%, engineering was 29%. This year, among our engineering fourth-year students, 56% female. I'd say the one department that's still probably down like the 25% level is physics. But I will say, I mean, it's a great question. So the head of the math department, so I have a joint appointment in math and CS. And the head of the math department said to me last week, he said, tell me the real story. Didn't you really do this women in CS thing? And I said, no. And he said, but isn't it true that now all the females who want to major in computer science apply to MUD? And I'm going, Andy, like, we have maybe 2 per year who think they're going to major in CS. It has nothing to do with our being known for women in CS, because, yeah, we're really known for women in CS in the tech industry, but not in any of the high schools.
Right. I just meant that after admission,
Right.
They will make a choice. And you've already answered that computer science was the one that is in need of attention.
Right.
So I suppose that if you solve the problem well in computer science, some other department will need that same attention.
Yeah, so, I mean, the situation with physics is more complicated. It just is more complicated. One of the things that's happened in the US, and I'd be interested to know whether it's happened in Canada over the last decade, the preparation in math, physics, chemistry has really declined in the United States because of the increased focus on testing, this No Child Left Behind. And so, you know, when we admit students now that have a 5 in all of their AP courses and 800s on, you know, their subject tests and physics and so on, it doesn't mean the same thing necessarily as it meant 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because they've learned how to write tests really well. They're bright students, but they haven't had a lot of experience in reasoning and conceptual thinking. And so the rest of our departments have sort of taken the attitude that we're admitting great students. Yes, they're less well prepared than they were, but within 2 semesters, they're going to be where we would expect them to be. And physics has sort of taken the attitude that we just can't teach these students. And that you know, there are things said like, you have diversified our student body on the backs of the physics faculty. So, there's some complicated stuff going on there. Yes?
I'm a little concerned with the way you're redesigning this course is reinforcing stereotypes and saying, you know, women can't handle the normal CS class. We have to put the word creative in there because they all like poetry and stuff. We need the word teamwork because they all want to chat with their friends. I don't know, I would be a little bit insulted if I were a first year student and you're explaining this reasoning to me. Can you comment on that?
Well, it's not just the women that like the course a lot better, it's the vast majority of the men. Everybody likes the course better. They love the course. They think we did a great thing because we created a course that everybody loves instead of hates. So, you know, nobody complains. The men don't complain, the women don't complain. I mean, it's also radically increased the number of students of color majoring in computer science as well. I mean, they love the fact that they're taking a course that they think is incredibly fun. It's really hard. I mean, it's not easier in any way, but they think it's incredibly fun, incredibly enjoyable, incredibly interesting. I don't know. I've never complained about being in an incredibly fun, interesting class in my life. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm kind of curious, kind of somewhat following up her question. Do you get many female students actually in your CS42 class, and how do they handle like the male machoism versus, you know, just like maybe there were one or two females in CS42, but they're like just that level ahead that they
Yeah. So we typically, I would guess in CS42, if we have 40 students, maybe we have 6 females, something like that. But I don't think, I mean, they're already the females who were taking advanced computer science in high school. So, you know, I think they're perfectly comfortable being the only female in a class because they've been the only female in a class, and now they actually have more than one of them in the class. And plus, you know, because we have this big emphasis on collaboration, which is not just in computer science, it's in every course, our learning environment, I would say, is very supportive of everyone, males and females. Joe.
So you had a couple of points on your slide that we didn't talk about in changes that you made to the first year course. One of them had to do with teamwork and one of them had to do with assignments and labs.
Right.
So I was wondering what changes you made there, what the rationale is.
So I think the assignments and labs were there to some extent, but one of the things we think is really important is having students work on their homework in an environment where there are other students or faculty there to help them if they have questions, because we know that one of the things that often discourages female students is if they're working on their own and they get stuck and, you know, they're not going to be probably as aggressive going and getting help. So
Everybody else is doing assignments by themselves just fine, it's just me that's not.
yeah, exactly. So that was one part of it. The teamwork, you know, I guess part of that is trying to integrate some best practices from agile programming, like peer programming, and you know, we find that, I mean, we know everyone is going to end up working in a team, no matter what you do for the rest of your life. So our goal is to have students work in teams from day one and do that in many of their classes. So I think that was just part of, I mean, when our faculty decided to work on this problem, they went and read every paper they could find from places that had actually made progress. And so there were a number of papers that came out of, I'm trying to remember, UC Santa Barbara maybe, about the use of pair programming, dramatically increasing persistence by female students, both in completing the Intro CS class and in taking the next course. And so I think that was probably partly that. The emphasis on problem solving, you know, actually applying computer science to solve problems. There's been a fair amount of work on that issue as well. So, you know, they basically went and they read everything they could lay their hands on, and then they started working on it. But, you know, it's one of these things, it didn't all just happen overnight. It's, I mean, basically they've changed the first course, but then they realized that the students were coming to the second course and expecting the same kind of intense, engaging, interesting, fun experience, and they weren't finding it. So then they changed the second course. And eventually it's sort of, they've changed the entire way they teach. And I think one of the things that becomes very different is it's just a different class dynamic when you've got roughly 50-50 gender balance. And our faculty really love that. Yes,
Can you
Mary?
comment on your applicant pool? Like, I think it's great that you've got so many women there to begin with, but like when we look at our applicant pool here, we just don't have many women that apply, so as a result, you don't have many women that you admit. So what's the ratio of your applicant pool?
It's about 27% female. It's gone, it might be, no, I guess it was 30% this last year. It was 27.
But then your offers are 50-50.
Our offers are 50-50. So,
Can you comment on your admissions? Like, how you decide who admitted? Is it really
yeah.
hard?
So if we look at, so we're very honest in all of our materials about, you know, what we're expecting in terms of SAT scores, GPAs, background, all of these kinds of things. So we get, let's say, 3,500 applications a year, and we're going to admit 600 and some. Of those 3,500, 2,500 are at or above the bar, right? So then from those 2,500, we have to pick 600.
Yeah, okay.
So I would say typically there are about 1,000 females whom we could admit, so we're going to pick 300 of those.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So then, you know, to a large extent, we're trying to have a class that is balanced with respect to interest, geographic diversity, racial diversity. You know, we're trying to get as mixed a group as we can because we think diverse communities are better learning environments for everyone.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you very much, okay, for coming to speak with a fascinating talk. And secondly, we always present a present from the school.
So this is amazing. So who does this? Who makes this?
It's one of our fellow in my department.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love it. And practical too. Thank you very much.